The mud on his boots was still fresh, not the kind of "I drove through a puddle" mud. The kind that says, "I've been working since 4 a.m., and I don't care what you think." James Chen looked up from his computer screen at Morrison Equipment Sales in Fresno, California. It was 10:47 a.m. on a Thursday morning in September 2019. Standing in his showroom doorway was a man who looked like he'd walked straight out of a Dust Bowl photograph. Weathered face, sun-carved wrinkles, flannel shirt with the elbows worn through, jeans that had seen better decades, not just better days. James had been selling agricultural equipment for 18 years. He could spot a tire kicker from 50 yards. This guy definitely couldn't afford the key chains in the gift shop. Then the old man spoke. "I need 15 John Deere tractors. Have them ready by Monday." James laughed, not a chuckle. A full, chest-heaving, tears-in-the-eyes laugh. "Sir, do you have any idea what you just asked for?" Before we go any further, grab yourself a coffee and get comfortable, because what you're about to hear will completely change how you see people. If you're enjoying this story, please hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Now back to James, who's about to learn the most expensive lesson of his career, and it won't cost him anything but his ego. What James didn't know was that the old man standing in front of him, looking like he couldn't afford a tank of diesel, was about to write a check that would make James question everything he thought he knew about wealth. The old man didn't react to the laughter, just stood there, patient as a fence post. "My name is Thomas Sullivan," he said, his voice steady and calm. "I run Sullivan Ranch about 40 miles north of here, and I wasn't asking if you could get me 15 tractors. I was telling you I need them. Now can we do business, or should I drive to Bakersfield?" James wiped his eyes, still smiling, still thinking this was some kind of joke or maybe a mental health episode. "Mr. Sullivan, let me explain something. 15 tractors? Even if I wanted to sell you 15 tractors, which would be, conservatively, $650,000 to $800,000 depending on the models, I don't have 15 tractors. Nobody does. That's not how dealerships work." He said it slowly, like explaining to a child why they can't have ice cream for breakfast. Tommy reached into his shirt pocket. Not a wallet, a folded piece of paper. He unfolded it slowly, methodically, and placed it on James's desk. It was a handwritten list, and the specificity of it made James's smile falter. 4 John Deere 507 5E tractors from 2015 to 2018 models. 3 John Deere 6120M from 2016 to 2019 models. 4 John Deere 6145M from 2017 to 2020 models. 2 John Deere 721 0R from 2018 to 2020 models. 2 John Deere 8245R from 2019 to 2021 models. At the bottom of the page, written in the same shaky but deliberate handwriting, budget $870,000, payment cash, delivery this weekend. James stopped smiling. This wasn't a joke. This was either a very elaborate scam or something he'd completely misjudged. He pulled up his inventory system with hands that were suddenly a little less steady. He had 2 5075E models, 16120M, 26145M, 17210R, and 08245R models in stock. 6 tractors total that matched Tommy's requirements. "I have 6 that fit your list," James said, his tone shifting from condescending to cautious. "The rest I'd need to source from other dealerships, auctions, or trade-ins. That could take 4 to 6 weeks, maybe longer." Tommy didn't hesitate. "How much for the 6 you have?" James ran the numbers quickly. 25075S at $77,500 combined. 16120M at $68,000. 261 45Ms at $166,500 combined. 17210R at $114,000. Total, $426,000. He said the number slowly, deliberately, watching Tommy's face for the flinch. for the excuse, for the moment when this fantasy would collapse. Instead, Tommy pulled out a checkbook. Not a business checkbook, a personal one. Blue, standard issue from Valley First Credit Union. Make it out to Morrison Equipment? Tommy asked, already clicking his pen. James felt his stomach drop. Mr. Sullivan, I need to verify funds before I can accept a check of this size. Tommy nodded, already writing. Of course you do. I'd be disappointed if you didn't. He tore out the check with a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the suddenly quiet showroom. $426,000. Signed, Thomas J. Sullivan. James stared at it like it might bite him. He excused himself, walked to his office, and called Valley First Credit Union with hands that were actually trembling now. The bank manager confirmed what James couldn't believe. Thomas Sullivan's account was in excellent standing. The check would clear, and Mr. Sullivan had $3.4 million in his checking account. James almost dropped the phone. James walked back into the showroom on legs that felt disconnected from his body. He looked at Tommy with completely new eyes, seeing past the muddy boots and patched jeans to something he'd missed entirely. You have $3.4 million in your checking account, James said. And it wasn't a question, but a statement of disbelief. Tommy smiled, a small knowing smile that said he'd been through this dance before. Had $3.8 million last month. Bought some land. It fluctuates. He said it the way someone might mention they'd bought groceries. James felt heat creeping up his neck, embarrassment mixing with something like awe. Mr. Sullivan, I apologize. I shouldn't have laughed. I just assumed. Tommy held up a weathered hand, cutting him off gently. You laughed because I look like I can't afford a tank of diesel. I get it. Happens all the time. Banks, restaurants, even the feed store sometimes. He sat down in the chair across from James's desk without being invited, settling in like he had all day. You want to know how a guy who looks like me has $3.4 million? James nodded, unable to form words. I'll tell you. But first, let's finish this transaction. I want those 6 tractors delivered to my ranch by Sunday evening, and I want you to source the other 9 within 3 weeks. Can you do that? James's brain was suddenly working overtime, calculating commission. 15 tractors at $870,000 total. His commission rate was 4% on sales over $100,000. That's $34,800 in commission from one customer in one transaction. The largest deal of his entire career, and it was sitting in a chair wearing boots held together with duct tape. Mr. Sullivan, I can source them. It'll take some calls, some favors, but I can absolutely do it. Tommy nodded, satisfied. Good. Now let me tell you a story. He leaned back, and his voice took on the quality of someone who told this tale before, but never tired of the telling. I was born in 1951. My father, Patrick Sullivan, owned 280 acres in Madera County. Dairy farm, small operation. We were never rich, but we made it work. In 1987, I was 36 years old. My father had just died. Heart attack. He was 64. Left me the farm, but he also left me $180,000 in debt. Equipment loans, operating loans, a second mortgage he'd taken out in 1983 when milk prices crashed. Tommy's eyes were distant now, seeing something James couldn't. I had a choice. Sell the farm, pay off the debts, walk away with maybe $60,000, or keep the farm and figure it out. I kept it. The decision to keep that farm changed everything, Tommy explained. The first thing he did was sell everything that wasn't essential. His father had 5 tractors. He only needed 2. Sold 3 at auction and got $94,000, which went straight to paying down debt. Then he did something everybody said was crazy. He stopped buying anything new. No new equipment, no new trucks, no new nothing. If something broke, he fixed it himself. Learned welding, learned hydraulics, learned electrical. YouTube didn't exist yet, so he bought manuals and figured it out in his barn at 2 in the morning after a full day of work. By 1995, he'd paid off every penny of that $180,000 debt. Took him 8 years of living like a monk, working like a machine, and saving every dollar that didn't go directly to keeping the farm running. James was leaning forward now, completely absorbed. This wasn't just a story about money. This was a master class in discipline. Here's what most people don't understand about farming, James, Tommy continued, his voice picking up intensity. It's cyclical, not just the seasons, the money. Every 10 to 15 years, there's a crisis. Prices crash. Debt crushes people. Farms get foreclosed. Auctions happen. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, California went through a massive agricultural crisis. Drought, price collapses, rising costs. Farms that had been in families for 80 years were getting auctioned off like garage sales. Tommy went to his first farm auction in 1998, a 640-acre almond operation in Merced County. The family was losing everything. Their equipment went to auction, and there were 200 people there. 90% of them were there to get deals, Tommy said. Vultures. They didn't care that a family was losing their heritage. They cared about getting a $90,000 tractor for $30,000. I was part of that 90%, Tommy admitted, and there was something like shame in his voice. I bought a 1994 John Deere 7800 for $28,000. It was worth $75,000. I drove it home feeling sick. Not because I got a bad deal, because I got a great deal at someone else's catastrophe. That tractor sat in Tommy's barn for 6 months. He couldn't bring himself to use it. Every time he looked at it, he thought about the farmer who'd lost everything. Then, everything changed when a young guy named Marcus Rodriguez showed up at his ranch. Marcus Rodriguez was 24 years old, and he wanted to farm. Not work on a farm, but own one. Build something. His grandfather had been a farm worker. His father had been a farm worker. Marcus wanted to break that cycle, but he had no equipment, no credit, no collateral. Banks wouldn't even return his calls. He'd heard through the grapevine that Tommy had tractors, so he showed up one Saturday morning and asked if Tommy would sell him one. Tommy looked at this kid standing in his yard, all hope and desperation, and something clicked. He sold Marcus that $7,800 for exactly what he'd paid at auction, $28,000. But he did it on terms that no bank would ever offer. $2,000 down, $500 a month for 4 years, 0 interest. Total payback, $26,000. James interrupted, unable to help himself. Wait, you lost $2,000. Tommy's smile was enigmatic. I lost $2,000 on paper, but Marcus paid it off in 3 years instead of 4. Then he came back and bought 2 more tractors from me. Same terms. Today, Marcus owns 850 acres. He's worth about $4.2 million, employs 12 people year-round, sends his kids to college. I didn't lose $2,000, James. I invested it. Best investment I ever made. That was the beginning of what Tommy called the system. Between 1998 and 2019, he went to 67 farm auctions across California and Nevada. He bought equipment at every single one. Tractors mostly, but also combines, harvesters, irrigation systems. Spent about $2.1 million total over those 21 years, buying equipment worth probably $5.5 million at market value. But he didn't keep it as an investment portfolio. He sold it to young farmers, 83 farmers to be exact. Tommy pulled out a worn notebook from his back pocket, and James saw that it was filled with names, dates, equipment specifications, and payment terms. Every farmer I've helped is in here, Tommy said, running his finger down pages of handwritten entries. Marcus Rodriguez, 1998. Elena Vasquez, 2001. David Kim, 2003. Jasmine Patel, 2007. The list went on and on. Some he sold equipment to at cost with zero interest. Some he gave equipment to completely free. It depended on the person, their situation, their character. He'd given away about $900,000 in equipment over 21 years and sold another $1.2 million at cost with zero interest financing. James was doing math in his head, and none of it made sense. Mr. Sullivan, you're telling me you gave away or sold at cost over $2 million in equipment. How are you sitting here with $3.4 million in the bank? Tommy's smile widened. Land. While everyone else was buying new equipment in the 1990s and going broke in the 2000s, Tommy was saving cash. No equipment debt. No operating debt. Just saving. Between 1998 and 2012, he bought 9 farms at auctions, paid cash for every single one. He pulled out another piece of paper. This one, a handwritten spreadsheet that looked like it had been folded and unfolded 1,000 times. In 1998, he bought 320 acres at $1,850 per acre for $592,000. In 2000, 480 acres at $2,100 per acre for just over $1 million. The list continued through 2014, each purchase timed perfectly to coincide with market crashes or desperate sellers. Total, 3,420 acres, purchased for $8,128,000. Today, Tommy said, letting the words hang in the air, that land is worth between $12,000 and $18,000 per acre, depending on location and water rights. Conservative estimate, $14,000 per acre average. That's $47.8 million in current value. James felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. This man sitting in front of him in duct tape boots and a flannel shirt with holes in the elbows was worth almost $50 million. Mr. Sullivan, you're one of the richest men in California. Tommy shrugged. On paper. But I don't care about that number. I care about what I do with it. He leaned forward, and his voice dropped to something almost reverent. I'm 78 years old, James. My wife passed away in 2016. We never had children. I have no heirs except some distant cousins I haven't spoken to in 30 years. I'm selling everything. He let that statement settle before continuing. Over the next 2 years, I'm liquidating all 3,420 acres. I've already sold 840 acres this year for $11.8 million. The rest will sell by 2021. After taxes, I'll net approximately $28 million. I'm putting $22 million into a foundation, the Sullivan Agricultural Opportunity Fund. It'll provide zero-interest equipment loans and grants to young farmers who can't get conventional financing. The math was staggering. Conservatively invested at 4% annual return, that's $880,000 per year. Forever. Enough to help 15 to 20 farmers every single year in perpetuity. But before I die, Tommy said, and there was steel in his voice now, I want to help 50 farmers immediately. I've already identified them, researched them, vetted them. These 15 tractors are for 15 of those farmers. The 6 tractors were delivered to Sullivan Ranch that Sunday, and James personally drove one of them because he needed to see Tommy's operation with his own eyes. When he arrived, his mind broke. Sullivan Ranch was 440 acres of the original family property. Modest ranch house that looked like it hadn't been updated since 1975. Barn from the 1960s. Corrals. Work sheds. Nothing fancy, Nothing impressive. But parked in those sheds were 32 tractors, all maintained, all operational, all waiting. Mr. Sullivan, why do you have 32 tractors if you're selling everything? James asked, unable to keep the confusion out of his voice. Tommy smiled that knowing smile again. These are going to farmers. Within 60 days, all 32 will be on working farms. Over the next 3 weeks, James worked harder than he'd ever worked in his career. He called in favors from dealerships across California, Nevada, and Arizona. He attended 2 auctions personally. He negotiated, begged, and promised future business to secure the remaining 9 tractors on Tommy's specific list. Each delivery came with a story that changed James a little more. Maria Santos was 28 years old, a first-generation American whose parents had been migrant farm workers their entire lives. Maria had worked as a nurse for 6 years and saved $85,000. She wanted to farm specialty vegetables, organic, high-value crops that could change her family's trajectory. But she couldn't get financing because she had no agricultural credit history. When James delivered the 2018 John Deere 6145M, worth $84,500 to her property, Tommy told her it was free, completely free. Maria stood in front of that tractor and cried for 20 minutes while her parents held her. My parents picked vegetables for 40 years, she said through tears. They never owned anything. Now I own a tractor worth more than every car they ever drove, combined. James stood there watching, and something fundamental shifted in his chest. This wasn't a transaction. This was a life being changed in real time. Maria now farms 160 acres of organic vegetables with annual revenue of $890,000 and net profit of $240,000. She employs 8 people, including her parents, who finally retired from the fields at ages 67 and 69. Daniel Armstrong was 33 years old and a 4th-generation farmer. His great-grandfather had homesteaded 320 acres in 1919, and the family had farmed it for 89 years until Daniel's father lost everything in 2008 during the financial crisis. Foreclosure. Auction. Gone. Daniel had worked construction for 10 years, saving every dollar, and in 2018 he bought back 80 acres of the original family land. But he had no equipment, and renting was costing him $35,000 per year, eating up most of his profit. Tommy sold him 2 tractors, a 2017 5075E and a 2019 612 0M. Total value, $107,500. Sale price, $107,500. Exact cost. Terms, $5,000 down, $850 per month for 10 years, 0 interest. Total payback, $107,000. When James explained the terms, Daniel's voice broke. My father lost everything because of interest and debt. Tommy's giving me a chance to rebuild without that weight. This isn't just a business deal. This is redemption. James shook Daniel's hand and walked back to his truck with his vision blurred. The last delivery was to Jasmine Nguyen, who at 25 was the youngest of the 15 recipients. Her parents had fled Vietnam in 1985, came to California with nothing, and worked in agriculture their entire lives. Jasmine graduated from UC Davis with a degree in agricultural science. She had dreams, knowledge, and ambition, but no resources. Tommy gave her the most expensive tractor in the entire batch, a 2019 John Deere 8245R, worth $187,000. Free. No payment plan, no terms. Just free. James was there for the delivery, and he watched Jasmine stand in front of that massive tractor with tears streaming down her face. Do you know what this means? She asked, her voice shaking. I can farm 400 acres with this. I can start an operation. I can build a business. I can give my parents the retirement they deserve." She turned to Tommy, who was standing off to the side, like this was nothing special. "Tommy didn't give me a tractor. He gave me a future." That evening, Tommy invited James to his ranch for dinner. They sat on Tommy's back porch, watching the sun set over the Central Valley, and Tommy said something James would never forget. "You're good at your job, James. You know equipment. You know sales. But you don't know people. When I walked into your dealership 3 weeks ago, you saw mud on my boots and patches on my jeans. You saw an old man who probably couldn't afford anything. You judged me in 3 seconds. And you laughed." Tommy's voice wasn't angry, just matter of fact. "That laugh cost you nothing, but it could have cost you everything. If I'd walked out, you'd have lost a $900,000 deal. But here's the bigger lesson. How many other customers have you judged? How many people have walked into your showroom and you dismissed them because they didn't look rich? How many million-dollar deals have you missed because you judged people by their boots instead of their character?" Thomas Sullivan died on February 14th, 2022. He was 81 years old, passed peacefully in his sleep at his ranch. His funeral was held at a community center in Fresno, and over 800 people attended. James Chen was there, standing in the back, watching as 127 farmers Tommy had helped over 24 years stood and shared their stories. The original 83 from Tommy's personal efforts, plus 44 more who'd been helped through the foundation he established. They came from 6 states. Maria Santos spoke about how an $84,500 tractor turned into 320 acres and a $1.8 million net worth and 15 employees. Daniel Armstrong spoke about redemption, about buying back 440 acres of his family's original homestead. Jasmine Nguyen, now 28, spoke about owning 640 acres and being worth $3.2 million and buying her parents a house for their retirement. Each story was different, but they all had the same core. Tommy believed in them when nobody else did. That belief became farms. Those farms became legacies. Those legacies became futures for children who would never know poverty the way their parents had. At the end of the funeral, James stood up. He hadn't planned to speak, but he couldn't stay silent. "My name is James Chen. I sold Tommy his last 15 tractors in 2019. When Tommy walked into my dealership, I laughed at him, thought he was a joke, couldn't possibly afford anything." His voice cracked, and he didn't try to hide it. Then he wrote a check for $426,000 from a checking account with $3.4 million. I've been selling equipment for 23 years. I thought I knew everything. New tractors, new farming, new business. But Tommy taught me the most important lesson in one afternoon. Never judge people by how they look. Judge them by how they act. James looked around the packed room. Tommy looked poor, dressed poor, drove a beat-up truck, but he was worth $50 million, and he gave most of it away. I've thought about Tommy every single day since September 2019. Every time a customer walks into my dealership, I think, what if this is another Tommy Sullivan? What if I'm about to judge someone who could change my entire perspective? He wiped his eyes. Tommy didn't just teach me about tractors. He taught me about humanity, and I'll never laugh at muddy boots again. The Sullivan Agricultural Opportunity Fund continues to operate with an endowment that's grown to $31.4 million as of 2024. The fund has helped 156 farmers since 2020, bringing the total number of farmers helped to 239 when you include Tommy's personal efforts. The combined net worth of those 239 farmers is now $418 million. They own 34,600 acres. Collectively, they've created 1,840 jobs. They generate $187 million in annual revenue. All because one man in muddy boots decided that wealth wasn't about what you keep, but what you give away. James Chen left Morrison Equipment in 2023. He now serves as executive director of the Sullivan Fund, taking a massive pay cut from his sales career to earn $87,000 a year. He says it's the most fulfilling job he's ever had. The 15 farmers who received tractors in 2019 are all still farming. Their combined net worth is $47 million, averaging $3.1 million per farmer. 9 of them have started their own mentorship programs. Together, they've helped 32 additional young farmers get started, continuing the cycle Tommy began. The old man in muddy boots changed 239 lives, created $418 million in wealth, generated 1,840 jobs, built a legacy that will help farmers for generations. And nobody knew while he was doing it. He drove a beat-up truck, wore patched jeans, looked like he couldn't afford breakfast. But he was one of the richest men in California, not because of what he owned, but because of what he gave away. Tommy Sullivan proved that real wealth isn't measured in bank accounts or acres owned. It's measured in lives changed, in opportunities created, in futures built from nothing but belief and a handshake. James learned that lesson the hard way, starting with a laugh that could have cost him everything. Now he spends his days making sure other young farmers get the same chance Tommy gave to 239 people. The Sullivan Agricultural Opportunity Fund accepts applications year-round. 0 interest, 0 judgment, just opportunity. Because somewhere out there, there's another kid, like Marcus Rodriguez, or Maria Santos, or Jasmine Nguyen, standing at the edge of a dream with no way to reach it. And Tommy Sullivan, even in death, is building them a bridge.